first reading presently.
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Climate Change Response Removal of Transitional Measure Amendment Bill be now read a first time. This bill phases out one of the temporary measures we introduced in 2009 to manage the initial impacts of the emissions trading scheme on businesses and the wider economy. The 1-for-2 surrender measure means non-forestry ETS participants have had to submit just one emissions unit for every 2 tonnes of carbon dioxide or equivalent greenhouse gas that they emit. It was extended in 2012 while New Zealand continued to recover from the global financial crisis. As I have been subtly signalling for some time, don't do subtle, it is now time to start removing this measure. The Paris Climate Agreement marks a new era when all countries are expected to take action on climate change. New Zealand has announced an ambitious target to reduce emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. As a result, our ETS must send a strong signal that we need to reduce our emissions and transition to a low-carbon economy. Businesses recognise this. 3/4 of submitters to the first phase of the ETS review supported removing it. However, the strongest message I received from businesses was that they wanted certainty from the government about what was happening with the ETS so that they could plan and make investment decisions. By phasing this bill through all stages under urgency, we are giving the market certainty about how and over what period 1-for-2 will be removed. From January 1 next year, the 1-for-2 measure will start to be phased out evenly across all relevant sectors over 3 years. The current 50% surrender obligation will increase to 67% from 1 January 17, then 83% from 1 January 18, and by 1 January 19, all sectors in the ETS will be at 100%, in other words, expected to pay the full surrender obligation. The current price ceiling of $25 per unit will remain. This will ensure businesses have certainty that the price of carbon cannot be more than $25. The free allocation of units given to emissions-intensive and trade-exposed industries will remain. These will be increased proportionately with a phase-out to protect our competitiveness. For example, if a company receives 90% free allocation now, it will still get 90% once 1-for-2 is removed. It is important for this free allocation to remain in place. To put too much financial pressure on some businesses could mean that they close their doors. Alongside the obvious loss of jobs and hit to the economy, it makes no sense if the products they were making are simply made in another country with no ETS. This would make them less efficient and may risk contributing actually more to global emissions in the end, and just doesn't make sense. So, why is removing 1-for-2 important? Removing 1-for-2 sends a strong signal to businesses that they need to invest in low emissions technologies and in forestry. It encourages the planting of more forests by increasing the demand for emissions units, which will be worth more. It takes 5 to 7 years for trees to start absorbing a decent amount of carbon, so we need that tree planting to start now. It will also reduce the potential fiscal risk that the government may have to purchase international units at unknown and possibly higher carbon prices over 2021 to 2030. This would happen if the ETS and our other initiatives don't deliver enough domestic emissions reductions, removals or international units of us to meet our target. It will also ensure there are sufficient New Zealand emissions units available so that the markets function properly. The phased approach, I think, is fair. It strikes the right balance between moving too fast and too slow. It incrementally increases costs across the whole economy and supports a stable market. Removing the 1-for-2 will have a broad impact, directly affecting the waste, transport, energy, electricity and industry sectors. Households may see a small increase in costs as those energy or petrol prices are passed to them. Modelling has showed that it could be, for low-income families, around $30 for a year, and for medium households, $40 to $45. everyone thinks that's actually on the high side and it's likely to be less. The fiscal impact, which is in the budget of $356 million of positive fiscal impact over the next 4 years, was actually based on a unit price of $12. Actually, the unit price right now, I was just looking, was $14.48. So already, actually, there'll be more in the government's coffers than what they budgeted, what we locked in a couple of months ago when the price was where it was at. So where we're looking at is we think it's minimal cost to households at the moment with the rise in benefits that this government has done, being the first one. There's perhaps a little bit there that they can actually accept that. We actually think there's enough competition in the energy market that hopefully they don't pass that whole cost on. We think we're being fair to those to the farmers and to businesses that do emit by giving them plenty of time so that they can phase out. Farmers will have an increased cost to them, not because, of course, we're bringing agriculture into the ETS, but because they're high users of electricity, transport, and actually Fonterra are one of the biggest emitters. So as a consequence of that, we could see there being some cost to farmers. That 3-year phase-in for us was making sure that we were fair and keeping that as low as possible at a time when they're doing pretty hard. So, Mr Speaker, it is with pleasure that I introduce and commend this bill to the House.
Members, the question is